I'm Darin Michalski. This is my wife Jessica, and this is Cutler. He's our oldest boy. We got another boy that's a senior in high school, and our daughter's a freshman in high school. And they all help on the ranch, farm. Well, one thing, see, I was going to call this deal, it ain't all sunshine and roses, because I've learned a lot of things at these meetings and gone home without really talking to anybody and applied them, and they've backfired. But Cindy wanted to talk about the next generation, so I'll tell how I've kind of screwed up the next generation's deal. But when we're making this, Jess is on one computer, he's on another computer. Now I've got my SIM card out of my old flip phone saying, here, put that picture in. Here, put that picture in. We need this. Do you know what you're doing? So there's definitely opportunity for the next generation on my farm. Like it says, my great-grandpa, of course I didn't listen enough when I was younger, came from Wisconsin, started farming. He was big, planted a lot of shelter belts. My grandparents bought the place where we live now. Back then they called it Green Acres, and when they bought it, they said you'll never make it because everybody that's been here has gone broke. I can remember my grandma talking about plowing under sweet clover and how good that was for manure. It was quite diverse. A lot of different crops back in the 70s. Dad kind of continued with that a little bit into the 80s. Heard all the stories about the 30s. Heard the stories about the 40s when they went and bought a quarter of ground and paid for it with one crop of flax. Watched the folks go through the 80s, and that 20-some% interest borrowed to the hilt was not fun. So I guess I've grown up quite conservative. And everything we do, try to think about it, you know, if it's needed, wanted, or how it's going to benefit us without a lot of input. And yeah, well, I grew up sitting in a tractor. Well, it was in a digger probably twice a year in the spring, a cultivator all summer, and then a mower plow in the fall. We've slowly transitioned out of that. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Anyhow, I got home from college. This 80 acres came up for sale, and the gal that owned it was an old school teacher, country school teacher. Her daughter inherited it, and she wanted a Michalski to buy it. My cousin didn't want it. It was solid quack grass and rock. Dad said, you know, here's a chance. I think it was like $225 an acre. I looked at that. I said, that's kind of high. He goes, yeah, but it butts right up to ours. I guess hindsight's 20/20, but I didn't have a heck of a lot stuck into my first venture in sowing stuff down. Tried to farm it for a few years. That was through the 90s. I'm sure it was PP for 2 or 3 years. Finally got corn in there, harvested 30 bushel of corn. Said that's enough. Took the plow out there, went half a mile back, 12 bottom plow. Not one time did all 12 bottoms stay in the ground. It was just bang, bang, bang. Went and rented a big heavy offset disc, disked it up. And I was just going to have the elevator come out and throw on some whatever. Give me some grass. Grass is good. Grass is all the same. About that time I met Jess, and her dad was raising some native seeds at the time. So we did some switchgrass, big blue, and then a cool season with alfalfa in the 4 different 20s with the idea of rotating. How are we doing here?
You're doing good.
All right. And back then, the big thing was monoculture. And I guess we've learned from there that doesn't work. And we'll get onto that.
I think the big thing, too, with, like he said, we were seeding those 80 acres down, and our plan was, okay, we got big blue stem over here in a monoculture, we got switchgrass over here in a monoculture, and then we got alfalfa cool season mix. And then we didn't cross fence it. So what we realized is that, you know, cattle, they will not choose switchgrass, generally speaking. And by the time we got out there to graze it, they go over and camp out on the big blue stem. You know, that's where they wanted to be. So we always had a our switchgrass, 20 acres or whatever, has always had a lot of wildlife, a lot of pheasants in there, because it's always basically been 4 to 6 feet tall. So I think that's one of the things, you know, should we have cross-fenced it? Yeah, maybe, but we weren't, right then we weren't really getting into management intensive grazing, which we'll talk about a little bit more here later in the presentation.
Hey, go back once. I've got the no-tilling in quotes. We bought a no-till, John Deere no-till drill in the 90s. We bought a John Deere no-till drill in the 90s, and we just thought you went out and no-tilled. And it didn't work. No-till will not work where we live. Thank God I've been to enough of these meetings, enough of these deals to figure out how you make no-till work, and it's not that hard, but you can't go work your wheat stubble and then no-till or plant corn into it, and then maybe work the corn and then no-till beans into that. Yeah, we've learned a lot the hard way, but it's been a good journey and passing on lessons to him. This would have been the first 80 that we sowed down, and you can kind of see the lines in there. It was some pretty rough ground. After that, we came up and sowed this 80 to monoculture big blue stem, and this was just an old hayfield, brome grass and alfalfa. And we've changed rotational systems through it. We haven't gotten real intensive on that piece yet. Yeah, these are some of the.
So that second quarter he was pointing out there, or the east 80 of that northwest quarter on that previous slide. You know, we decided at that point in time, kind of started working more and more with South Dakota NRCS, Game Fish and Parks, and we started talking to them more about cross fencing, about seeding native warm seasons, but we were still in the monoculture mentality. So this was, you know, 2001, and you know, I don't know how many of you I've met, but I work for South Dakota NRCS now, have been since about 03. But, you know, it was kind of a mentality among agency folks and, you know, other researchers and those types of things that monoculture was a good thing. And so, you know, obviously things have changed a lot in the last 20 years, but we were still in that mentality, and we're going to talk a little bit about a little more why that wasn't so great. But Cutler was born in May. All my kids were born in May, and it worked out really well because I could fix fence and plant grass and things like that with a baby in the infant seat. So Cutler was introduced to the joys of seeding grass and that north quarter Darin was talking about there, 10 feet at a time. So I don't know how many of you have run a Drax drill 10 feet at a time, but it takes about 3 days to plant 80 acres, especially when you have to stop and feed the kid. And the kid's falling, and he was a pain in the butt for a baby, but he learned to be patient after that. So, but Darin thought it would be a good thing for me to stay on the drill most of the time because he was planting crops and those types of things.
Yeah. So we kind of put this in the wrong spot. I was ranching with the farmer mentality, had a sprayer with a 90-foot boom, and wow, I could kill a lot of stuff. We've got pretty smooth pastures. You could go 4 or 5 mile an hour maybe. And if it wasn't grass, man, flip the boom on and smoke it. And I'm killing, now that I know, I'm taking out silver scurf pea, because that just looked like a nasty plant. Shouldn't have been there. It wasn't grass. I was spraying 1,000 acres of our 1,200 acres probably a year, just trying to get grass to grow. Looking back now, this has become a major. You want to explain this?
I just know that I've broken plenty of those because we've got plenty of thistles out in our pastures sometimes. And they're really good for swinging because they're pretty lightweight. And so just kind of looking at one of those, you know, not only getting rid of the thistles for me, but also looking at it as a grazing mentality and using kind of those kind of resources and managing your 50%, using your 50% and leaving your 50%, just kind of has been one of my big things on the farm, I guess, because I get to move a lot of cattle. So.
And back to the monoculture part, there's a lot of space in between the big blue stem plants that wasn't being covered by something. So Mother Nature took care and said, here's some thistles, or here's some wormwood, sage, or something that undesirable. So then we started kind of, I don't know if I ever really had a good plan for stuff. The one pasture had a really crappy fence on the west side. The farmer on the west side really doesn't like cattle in his crop ground. So I just started packing that 50 acres. I'd put 100 pair down there. We'd start hauling down there as soon as we could. Leave them out there for a month. That one year, they ate wormwood sage. And they went on to pick wormwood sage the rest of the summer. And I thought that was cool. I was telling a friend of mine about it. The next year I did it, they started eating leafy spurge. They just took a nip off the top. And he said, how do you figure this out? What's the genius behind rotational grazing? About a few days later, I called him back and I said, it's when Bob Schmidt calls and says your cattle are out, then you rotate. But they didn't go pick leafy spurge the rest of the time. But this was just a deal that, out of necessity, because of the fence was just a son of a gun to keep up, we hit it hard in the spring every year for about 5 years. It was a crested wheat, brome grass pasture. Now it's 90% native grass, every gosh darn forb, and there's a lot of variety.
Yeah, and we'll have some pictures of that towards the end of the. But like, again, it wasn't something that was necessarily planned, but it's something that we've done here for numerous years in a row to just hit that pasture early in the spring, and it's made a huge difference in the species composition.
Well, yeah, I guess we got a picture of it after this, don't we?
Yeah.
I don't need to read that to you. You guys can all see it. But we started to add a little bit different stuff. We had a lot of gravel knobs on this piece. So Jim Dilla talked me into putting in some side oats. The orchard grass, intermediate wheatgrass, I wish I had kind of stayed away from and just went warm season. I've found out that the cool seasons will find the warm season and creep in, but you can flip.
So this is the half section that we worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Game Fish and Parks and NRCS to see down that north west 80 was it old hay ground? We hayed it.
Here, yeah.
And then the south two 80s we seeded down to big blue stem and side oats, and then that northeast 80 was the intermediate and alfalfa.
Yeah, up here. And you can see, I mean, where there's not potholes and creeks, it's gravel. Really, we farmed it for years and years and years. Dad always said that it should have been grass. When he let me step into the operation, I went and talked to the landlord and made her a proposition, and it was a share crop, 3 2/3. I could pay more for pasture rent than she was getting on crop ground. And we quit losing money on this every year.
But that's just the difference between I wish you could see, you can't see the images really great here, but you can, like Darin said, you can see the potholes. Obviously you can still see the potholes, especially on that southeast 80. But really a lot of, just seeding all that down to grass has made a huge difference as far as our productivity. We got really fortunate. I think we got fortunate pretty much every time we seeded grass down. We didn't have a failure. Now we've had some failures and plenty of other things that Darin will talk about, but we always got really, really fortunate. We always had good rainfall afterwards. The big blue stem, we've dug down now in this pasture, and big blue stem roots are finding their way down, 6-8 feet. So it's really well established.
That's kind of part of the reason we no-till also. We've got a lot of those in our area. Planted my first cover crop. Didn't really have access. I was farming with my uncle at the time. Didn't want to hook up the big air seeder because he was busy doing other stuff and take the time. So I just went in there with a grass seed attachment on a 620 drill. Dropped it behind the wheat stubble, and it kind of came where the tire tracks were. Didn't have a heck of a lot of success. Years after that, tried to drill it in the right way, didn't have a lot of success. Of course, I'm stubborn, didn't really talk to too many people. Found out that it was probably our chemical that we were using that was inhibiting our cover crop success. What do we got next? Okay, now here's where we start talking successful. The C-80, it was 14 years ago. I planted that to alfalfa. The reason I know it was 14 years ago is I called my neighbor. I said, what year was that when you had that bull sale that got flooded out? And there was like 3 ravines that washed across that because I had worked it. I probably hadn't into alfalfa for 8 years. Went in with a winter wheat. Followed that with a cover crop. Turned the cows into it. 19 and 20 were wet, like way wet. That was the first field we've been able to get into the last 3-4 years. You can tell it's like driving on a sponge. There's adequate moisture there, stuff doesn't plug up, and it works wonderful. 2012 was the last year of any major type of tillage, and it was strip till. I didn't like that. I saw at one of these meetings, I saw pictures of the erosion, the gullies that were caused following the strips down, and our land is pretty hilly, and I didn't want to run into that type of trouble. And I also see a lot of strip till that blows in my country too. It's usually strip tilled bean stubble, and the dirt is in the ditches. Yeah.
Don't mind me.
I guess until the present, I kind of got stuck there for a few years. Ran the chisel plow a couple years. From 2012 to the present, we've gotten more diverse. We were corn, beans. Started planting oats, I don't know how long ago, just for a hay crop. And my buddy said, well, what are you going to do with it? I said, to bale it. He said, you realize that they said the oats is running 100 bushel an acre around here. I said, yeah, what's it worth? $1, $1.50? It was worth $4. That was the best cash crop I had that year. So oats has been a staple in our rotation. Been about a third. I always figured if it didn't make it, like this year, it wasn't going to make seed. We hate it. And then went in with a cover crop. But yeah, these are some of the things that we've had in the rotations. We're not really set on any, it's not 300 acres this, 300, it's kind of whatever fits where and what we're trying to do with that ground. If it's salinity issues,
Yeah, I do think that that's one of the major things that we've learned is, and we get that a lot in our area, right being, 40 miles or whatever east of the James River. We hear a lot that no-till doesn't work in our area, and it doesn't if you are only going to limit yourself to corn and soybeans. It's probably not going to work. And so we've just really decided to diversify. Having the livestock obviously presents a lot of opportunities because we always need livestock feed. So whether, like Darin said, whether that's changing up and utilizing the oats for hay versus grain, having hay millets, having alfalfa, and then we've done some things where we've done some season-long cover crops for both pollinator habitat and then grazing in the fall. We've had some major success with that as well, especially, right next to a lot of our pastures where we have access to livestock water year round. Here's Cutler in his early days of utilizing the grazing stick.
Go ahead on this one.
So I guess the big thing for me, it would have probably been more towards my senior year of high school. I got to go out a lot and move cattle around in the pastures, and that's kind of more when we started more of the intensive grazing. We started pushing cattle around pastures using smaller paddocks and kind of moving cattle around a little bit more. So we started recording some of our data, more to send for CSP, but just kind of getting out there and figuring out, well, we had this much when we put all the cattle in and this much when we took them out. I think that kind of helps to just show us how much time we spend out there with all the cattle, and just kind of showing what the grass is capable of when you kind of let it heal itself and make the ground work for you, I guess.
This was one a couple guys said they really like Sicer milk vetch. The guy that was selling me the seed said, I don't. And I said, oh yeah. I said, it's good stuff. It's not the greatest stuff. It really takes over. And this summer I had a chance. I was out at your ranch tour. I ran into Dean Lochner, and he liked Sicer milk vetch. And I said, well, Dean, how is yours established? And he said, well, there's some here and some here. I said, well, ours is like thick and 3-4 foot tall. He goes, oh God, yeah, no, that wouldn't be good. We have tried a few different ways. We really grazed it hard last year late in the fall. And the big blue stem is still there. It's still healthy, but it gets about as tall as a Sicer. I thought it would really shoot and outcompete. The bird's foot and the red clover. The red clover is just kind of here and there, and I like that stuff. The bird's foot, I don't mind. There's something about the Sicer, it's not real palatable for them, and I don't know why. I mean, we have pictures of cows with it hanging out of their mouths. I don't know if it's a little washy. I've tried hitting it early spring, and we really haven't hammered on it yet. I might try a pass. I might just go out with some 2,4-D and set it back, see what happens in a strip or two. But well, I took you out there when you were at my place. I said, look at this stuff. It's awesome. I'm going to have to make my gates bigger to get the calves out. It's not a dream come true. There's something there to eat. It's a non-bloat lagoon. We actually dug down this year and couldn't really find nodules where it's producing nitrogen for us, so I don't know quite what was going on there.
But it did solve the issue of having thistles in our big blue stem. We haven't sprayed these pastures that we interseeded in since they were interseeded. And there really hasn't been any major thistle issues. There's still enough out there for Cutler and Casey and Shay to have to whack with the grazing stick, but we don't have the problem anymore. So we solved one problem. We maybe created a little more of a problem for ourselves because we feel like it's impacting the growth of the big blue stem. But it did solve the problem of having that bare ground in between big blue stem plants. So. I guess we're still having trouble with the microphone. Are we gonna share?
I guess so. That's Casey riding the back of a Truax drill, getting it empty. Yes, it is black behind there. Every native seeding I've done, I've worked the ground, went in and rolled it, planted it, possibly rolled it again, just because I know it's going to, hope it's going to be in there for a long, long time. It's the necessary evil to get a darn good, consistent, established stand. You can see we've switched from the monoculture. We've added a lot more grasses. Oh shoot. You'll see in this next picture where we put the tall wheatgrass. That was a saline solution type thing. This field when we bought it, and granted you can only see the really, really bad saline, but it was all around here, and you can kind of actually see the drill marks. This whole headland was white. Down around here, okay, that's 5 years. That spot, we'll point it out with your red one. That's about the size of a pickup now. I'm guessing out of a 50-acre pasture, there was 10% that was white. This is a tire tank, so that's just trampled stuff. But it's basically all covered with vegetation.
And historically have been corn and soybeans.
Yeah, it had been no-tilled. Well, basically beans. We got the opportunity to purchase that from our neighbor in 14, and just knew that I didn't really want to give up 10% of spend 10% of expenses and give up 10% of crop every year. So that's why we went this route. Well, this was kind of an accident too. The more intensive grazing. On that half section I was showing you, it's split in 4 pastures with a single hot wire. And the one that was sowed to wheatgrass and orchard grass, I always seemed to have problems with pink eye when I kicked my cows out. I was at Barry and Eli Little's, and he was saying, hey, have you ever tried making your paddock smaller? Well, how much smaller? He goes, I don't know. What are you running right now? I said, well, about an 80. He said, try a 20. He said, it kind of seemed to help for us. So we tried it, and it kind of seemed to help on the pink eye. But what we noticed is we were running 100 pair on 80 acres for 2 weeks and then rotating. The first year we ran 5 days on 20 acres. The next year we upped it to 7 days on 20 acres. We doubled our carrying capacity. When we come back to it in the fall, the grass is healthier than it was back when it was a 2-week rotation. I can't quite explain that. It is getting more rest. But it's kind of like when you were talking about, Dan was talking about nipping that sorghum Sudan off and then letting it come back. It all reverts to that. They're not on there as long as, I'm starting to ramble. That picture kind of says it all. That field was prevent plant, work black the year before, twice. The kids went out to check the fence on our pasture, and it's a good 3.5 barb fence, kind of low. They said the fence was good. It blew like that. We went to kick cows in there. I went to check it out, and there was 2 barbs, maybe 1 barb in spots. I had to have been 2 foot of blow dirt in that fence. Sitting up on top of the hill, you could see it 15 miles just a rolling. So what we caught and what was blowing 15 miles away just scares me. And the next year he had prevent plant and did the same thing. But he got to run his drills over that like 3 times that year, replanting soybeans. That's kind of what ours looked like, kind of like that.
I was just gonna add that, yeah, so we had prevent plant also in 2020. He didn't have prevent plant, obviously, but the wind blew, the soybeans cut him off and he had to replant. But we planted instead, we planted a season-long pollinator cover crop, late seeded in June. But that's what it looked like in September, and then we dug down and took some pictures of the soil structure and that earthworms present. And I guess just kind of showing what it can look like as far as soil health versus the wind erosion that our neighbor experienced. So in July of this last year, we were asked to have Buzz Clute come out. I don't know if any of you know much about Buzz Clute, but if you haven't, if you don't know anything about Buzz, you should look him up because he does a fantastic job. He's a professor at the University of South Carolina, and he has an agreement with South Dakota NRCS to do a lot of video shoots. We've done some video shoots concerning prevent plant acres and some flooding and some issues on cropland. And then this last series is focused on resilience on grazing lands and really doing the rotate, rest, and recovery type options. So this is just some of the photos that they took that day that they came out. This would be on that quarter that was seeded in 2001. I think we must be over on the kind of more the brome grass side of that quarter for this picture, but you can see the cattle in the background, and that's where we have also done some more, smaller paddocks, 20 acres versus 80. This is just a drone shot of the cattle that day. There's the cow. I just had to put this in here because Darin hates the vetch and it's hanging out of her mouth. So she is eating it. He just doesn't, and she looks like she's getting plenty to eat. So this is just that's bird's foot, isn't it? And some blue stem.
You can click it.
More shots of blue stem and bird's foot. Here's our pretty shot of the monarch that they got out there. So
Click it.
that was pretty cool. Echinacea, just a lot of this.
That's down in that. That'd be down in that pasture that I was hitting so hard in the spring, developing, letting all this other stuff come back. Lead plant. Here we go. I got the cover crops to work. That's awesome. That's my senior in high school. That's a big turn up. And there's a lot of them out there. And that's how I did it. And that, I guess, what I think is the most important thing is that's the first time I ever put any fertilizer on my cover crops. I've had the timing right. I've had the rains right. Actually, this year was dry, and there's been 65 head of bred heifers and bulls out there since about the 1st of December. Drive by them every morning with the loader and the feed wagon, and they don't care if I'm there or not. They are plumb content. They're fat, and it was just went over to my neighbor who sells cover crop seeds and said, just give me something. I really didn't have a plan, mostly grazing, but just get me something growing out there. Who do we have out? Went and looked, and every species that we planted grew, which was, I don't think it happens every time, but not a lot invested in it. That was some of my leftover fertilizer from the year before, so it's not as shocking as it looks. Oh, that's your side.
This is my slide, he said. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't, of course, talk about the assistance that we've had, both financially and technical assistance. As I said, I started working for South Dakota NRCS in 2003, but obviously our partnership, Darin's partnership and my partnership with NRCS and others began back when we got married in '99. So, but some of the programs that we've utilized, one of the newest programs that's really assisted us financially is the Grasslands Conservation Reserve Program. I do think that that is an important program where we don't have to utilize easements, but there is a good payment involved for having that, for kind of having that foresight to seed a lot of this cropland back to grass. And so we've utilized that just recently for the majority of our pastures. And then a lot of partnerships, especially with infrastructure, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Game Fish and Parks. So as we were putting this presentation together, I was kind of talking to Darin and Cutler, and well, first of all, when Cutler decided about when you're a junior in high school, he's a junior in high school, we're kind of like, well, he's good at math, maybe he should go be an engineer or, something, make a lot of money. But we asked him, what do you want to do? Well, I was thinking I would come home. And Darin, bless his heart, has a degree in social work, and when I asked him when we got married why he has a degree in social work, he said because there was no math. And I've been doing the books ever since, because I was scared. And so when Cutler said he wanted to come home, Darin said, "Yep, sure, we'll make it work." And so I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute here. We need to start thinking about things." But I do know that we've made huge changes in our bottom line. Can we go to the coffee shop and brag that we have the best yields? No, we can't. But have we reduced our inputs by no-tilling? Have we saved a lot of time and energy and effort? Do we have the equipment costs that other producers have? No, we don't. Reduced feed costs, like Darin said, we've got cattle out grazing cover crops that don't seem to care that there's a tractor that gets started. Increased carrying capacity, and then additional labor and management with adding Cutler to the operation.
I kind of wish we'd take that top one out. Cutler had opportunity to rent some pasture, which was good. I don't think renting more pasture and crop ground is a great way to get a young guy started. Everybody knows the cost. Unless you have somebody that'll do you a favor, it's kind of spendy. I think making the most out of what we have is the greatest thing we can do to help the next generation come in. Right now we're kind of set up to handle what we have. When Cutler's home full-time, that might change. Maybe we'll need to expand a little bit, but right now we're sitting pretty comfortable. Well, yeah. If I'm smart enough to listen and have an open mind, another set of eyes, ears, and ideas is going to be very beneficial, which I'm sure some of you guys have seen. I know some of your dads have seen. And if open and honest communication. If you got a problem, let her out. Let's talk about it. We might argue for a while, but that's all right. Get her out in the open. Any questions? Yeah.
Have you considered planting like clovers with your oats when you plant it in the spring, so you get something established for cover crop later?
No, but I'm open to any suggestions.
It's something we've done a few years now, and if you are going to hay it anyway, or if that's an option for you, then that would work well. We've taken 100 bushel oats crop off with the clovers, and we've also hayed it when it has the moisture. So it establishes those clover curves.
Just to point to that 180 that I was saying was such a success story, I can get out of here now. I was planting it 2 years ago, oats, and when you're in a 20-foot drill, you notice a lot more stuff than when I used to be in a four-wheel drive tractor and 40-foot. I was driving along and I'm looking out the window and there's nothing green coming. And when I got done planting, I would go home, get in the sprayer, get the glyphosate, carnivore, and smoke it. I was like, well, shoot,
there's a little patch of grass right here. I'll come back over with the four-wheeler and hit that. I didn't spray that oat crop that year, and it made 100 bushel. It's like, well, shoot, why couldn't I have maybe had something beneficial growing? Yeah, good idea. How about something for the kid?
Would the clover, will it come back then after, if you harvest it?
I just noticed you had planted common veg and crimson clover after the oats, and that's something we would plant with the oats. So if you're gonna do it anyway,
Yeah.
might as well start early. So.
I don't know, well, you probably couldn't hear him on the internet, but he said, why not plant some clover with the oats when you plant it in the spring? Because it'll be there in the fall for you.
I've got one for Cutler. What do you think you should change, or what would you like to see change? I mean, is there something where you could see you could make an improvement on the operation?
So Dan asked me if there's anything that I would like to change in our operation. There's probably definitely things we could change. I mean, just seeing what Mom and Dad have done throughout the past 20 years when I was growing up, and even before that, and just kind of, I don't know, really changing a whole lot, but increasing the amount that we do, maybe, and using more of the practices that we've came to use, doing more cover crops maybe, or just kind of pushing more to using soil health. And a big thing for me is cattle, so using our cattle more, using them for cover crops, maybe using fertilizer more, just kind of, yeah.
Follow-up question there. Sounds like you really enjoy cattle. So when are you gonna start moving the cows every day?
Well, it'd probably be more when I maybe don't take as many internships, because like this summer I got the honor to work with the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition for my internship, and I did that for credit from the university. And so, yeah, being home more often and just, yeah, being able to be out there and do more would benefit myself.
Cutler, have you thought about diversifying, like the chickens and goats and stuff like that, or?
I don't like sheep, don't like chickens, don't like goats. So I really haven't given it much thought. Maybe hogs, but no, really haven't given it much thought. But
we had discussed, nothing's off the table.
yeah, diversification is always good on our operation.
When do you guys calve?
We calve normally March, April, end of March, and then into April and May.
We backed off. The cows start about the middle of April. We backed off about a month.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't mention was our changing calving dates. We used to start our heifers about the 1st of March and then our cows about the 15th of March, I suppose. We did not have a lot of fun during those two blizzards in, what was that, 18 and 19? That wasn't fun. So we did make some changes there. We now start calving. We still calve our heifers in March, but we do have a shed big enough to put the heifers in at night. So that was kind of why we decided to keep those dates, 50, 60 heifers, I suppose, every year. And so that we've been good with that, but we don't start calving our cows till about the 20th of April now. It's made a huge difference the last couple of years. And I don't think we're going back